Just back from the ANTN, Affiliated New Thought Network annual retreat at Unity Village. And the theme this year is convergence. And that was that's the logo for the convergence theme. It's love, learn, decide, and do. It was an absolutely inspiring 5 days. And convergence is all about bringing the pieces into alignment. It's about looking for harmony and for fit, and not saying that something needs to be fixed in order to be better. Convergence is allowing those alignments to happen in the way that they do. And being on the grounds at Unity Village was wonderful. If you have never been there, it's a bucket list sort of thing, especially for people who are in New Thought. It's 1,200 acres. It's in Lee's Summit, Missouri, which is just outside Kansas City. It was built by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who were leaders in New Thought and formed the Unity movement. And there's some really wonderful things that go on there. One of their sons was really captivated by Mediterranean architecture, so that's the design of the place. There are gorgeous fountains in the central courtyard, and wonderful walking trails. They have a lake that you can walk to and around. And the whole place is peaceful, and it's filled with folks who have a very similar belief system to the one that we share. So it's really wonderful to be there. Had an opportunity to do yoga in the Fillmore Chapel every morning of the retreat, which was wonderful. And possibly the highlight for me this year, as it is every year, was to have a chance for half an hour to take part in the Silent Unity Prayer Vigil. And this is something that was started over 125 years ago. It's been going 24/7, continuously ever since. Even with pandemics, they moved it online so that the prayer workers who are on staff at Unity could continue to do it from home. But that vigil has been running continuously for all of that time. There's a huge amount of spiritual energy that's involved in that. And probably 30,000 people a month who are either calling or emailing or texting in their prayer requests to Silent Unity. And the people who are in the prayer vigil are holding all of those intentions in prayer during the time that we're in the vigil. So you ride up the elevator and get off in silence on the third floor and are able to, at the top or the bottom of the hour, there's a little bit of a chime and the door opens and whoever was in there before comes out and the next group of people goes in and sits in silence for half an hour, steeped in that volume of intentionality for the 30,000 people who are praying for now and for the 125 years that this has been going on continuously. And the feeling of being in that sacred space is palpable, and it's truly uplifting and wonderful. If you ever have a chance to do that, I recommend that you do it because it's a wonderful thing. The sacred can be found everywhere. There's a story of a Buddhist temple in Thailand, and they had a clay Buddha in the middle of the temple area, huge clay Buddha. It wasn't particularly attractive, but it was the most sacred thing that they had, and they revered that clay Buddha as a rich part of their history, and that brought sacred intentionality to that. In 1957, they had to move the temple. They were reorganizing and rearranging things, so they had to move the clay Buddha. And there's a story of what happened when they did that. In fact, it winds up being the backstory of what happened there. And a lot of that was coming up at the retreat this week. We had a couple of wonderful keynote speakers. Milagros Phillips, who is, her nickname is the Race Healer. She started wanting 35 years ago to be teaching people about spirituality. But as a black woman, people wanted her to help them work through issues of racism. So she would go and do that and talk to them about spirituality anyway. And so it was just some wonderful insights that she brought along. Another one of the keynote speakers was Akumalafe, who's a philosopher and a PhD. And he had so many stories of the ways that he'd been studying mythology and history and stories and found a lot of the commonality. And the thing that he wanted to emphasize is that things break in order to break open. things break so that they can change. And he shared a whole bunch of stories from mythology and from scripture about things breaking in order to break open, to let something out. And the message that he had was the same message that Leonard Cohen had in the song Anthem that he wrote. And the lyric there is, there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. There's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. And, there are stories of, people who are praying and to God to give them something, and God smites them and breaks something. And it is in the breaking that something new becomes available. And that's a big thing for me, is there's a lot going on in the world and in our individual lives that we can look at and say it's things that are breaking. But that's where the breakthrough happens. The old needs to go away. The structure that's been in place needs to falter or crumble or be changed or transformed somehow in order for the newness to come in. So in the story of Golden Buddha in 1957, they had to move, the clay Buddha, they had to move it, and it cracked. There was a crack, there was a break in the clay Buddha, and it turned, and one of the monks saw that there was a glint of something bright in there. And they got the flashlights and they looked, and it looked gold, and they got some chisels and hammers and they took some of the clay off of it. And inside of the clay Buddha was a golden Buddha. In the middle of their temple had been this golden Buddha that was covered in clay. And as near as they can figure out, what had happened is hundreds of years earlier, there was an invading army that was coming through, and they were ransacking the country. And so the Buddhist monks covered their golden Buddha in clay to protect it and to hide it. And it worked. Apparently all of the monks there died in the invasion that happened anyway, so the story of what happened got lost. And they were left with this clay Buddha that they worshipped and honored as the sacred thing that it was because of what it meant to them spiritually. And hidden inside of that, all of those years, all of those centuries, was the golden Buddha. And that sort of thing is going on all the time. Inside of whatever it is that we're experiencing on a day-to-day and moment-to-moment basis, there is that golden source, that whatever it is that's inside. And when we have a breakthrough, something new can break through, and there's something new that becomes possible. So as you're dealing with challenges in your life, or you're looking at circumstances and situations saying, well, I'm not sure how I'm going to get up this hill, and I'm not sure how I'm going to find time off from work, and I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to get my life in order after the illness and the challenge and the difficulty and the upheaval and the. Remember that there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Allow that to happen. Don't necessarily fight it. Obviously, take care of that which is yours. But when there's time for transformation and a change, be open to the possibility that that transformation and change can be something that is good and wonderful and uplifting for you. I mentioned Milagros Phillips, who was absolutely wonderful. Every once in a while, I learn something new about history and how we got to where we are and how we became who we are. The last big one for me was understanding 1619 and how the powers that be in this country used racism as a way to maintain power for the people who were in the elite, basically by pitting the poor black people and the poor white people against each other. And obviously that's been working pretty well in this country. Milagros told me about something that I had not been aware of before. It's called the Doctrine of Discovery. Well, that sounds like a good idea. The Doctrine of Discovery. It seems like the sort of thing that everybody would be in favor of. And it turns out that the Doctrine of Discovery was an agreement made between the Pope and the Prince of Portugal in the mid-1400s, where the Pope announced that it was perfectly reasonable for civilized people, in other words, Catholics, to go and discover and colonize lands that were inhabited by people who were not Catholic. And that made it okay to go and take over the west coast of Africa. It later made it okay to go and take over the islands in the Caribbean, all of South America, Brazil, the United States, etc., etc., etc. And the Doctrine of Discovery was refined a few times over the years. And obviously there was an awful lot of colonizing that went on and a lot of other repercussions that have come about from the colonizing. But the thing that is the most astounding is because that was so important to the way that the colonizing was happening, that got baked into the laws of a lot of the countries that were colonized. And it's still cited in Supreme Court cases in the United States. I mean, in the 2000s, it's still being cited. And it was astounding to me that that's still going on. It was not surprising. I didn't know that it existed in the first place. But as we know, when we have a belief, when there's something that's operative in our consciousness, it stays operative until we go in and change it. All of those beliefs, all of those things that we learned as when we were children, remain operative, like computer programs that are put into a program, they start running, and they're going to continue running until we shut them down, until we change the program, until we reboot into something new and something different. So when we say, your new life begins with a new thought, got to get rid of the old thought. And if the old thought is something that sounds as inspiring and as uplifting as the Doctrine of Discovery, and in fact has caused as much pain and discomfort and suffering and inequality as it has in the world, then it's time for something new. It turns out there are groups of people all over the world who are continually asking the Pope to rescind the Doctrine of Discovery. Really? Oh my gosh. It's still in operation. He's still being asked to do it, and he hasn't done it. He went to Canada and apologized for basically the treatment of the natives, of the Indians in Canada, and being put into the educational schools and being taken away from their culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he stopped short of rescinding the Doctrine of Discovery. So I now have a new passion. I think it would be a good idea to rescind the Doctrine of Discovery and to take that and allow it to be part of our past, but not have it be something that's active in our present, so it's no longer controlling what's happening in our future. And there are huge implications that it has about how that's operating in our legal system and in our lives, et cetera, et cetera. You can Google it. It's right there. I didn't take anything that anybody said at this retreat at face value. So I went and did a little researching myself. And there's a lot of information that we can find about those sorts of things. And that made a huge impact on me, because I, in my life, am a huge fan of the level playing field. I love being able to excel at whatever it is that I'm doing. I love to be able to take my gifts and share them in a way that's going to bring uplift and value into the world around me. And I want everybody to be able to do that. I don't want anybody to be starting off at a lower place with a bigger challenge, with more difficulties, with stuff that they have to overcome just so they can get to the same starting point. I'm a huge fan of a level playing field. And I learned it from my mom. She was a huge fan of the level playing field as well. And as I learn more and more about how unlevel the playing field is, and how rigged the system is in favor of some people as opposed to other people, and along the way, I realized that it's rigged in favor of people who look like me. The more I get into that, the more passionate I become about, let's find the cracks and let the light to come in. Let's see what the golden Buddha is that's hidden inside of the clay. Let's find out what the gifts are that are inside of that. And instead of doing the things that we've always done to get the incremental results that we've always gotten, let's see what happens with a new paradigm. Let's see what happens with something brand new and different. The other keynote was Dr. James Mellon, who is the leader of the Global Truth Center. Actually, he's the leader of a couple of different. He's got two churches out in California. One's in Hollywood, Westlake Village, and he's got another one in Palm Desert that he's just taken the reins of. And he got thrown out of the Centers for Spiritual Living, or excused himself from the Centers for Spiritual Living, which is the big religious science organization, one of the New Thought groups, because he started saying as part of his teaching, I am God. Some people say, that's a little much. And so that's part of what his lesson is I am God. And he doesn't say that from a place of arrogance or superiority. He takes it back to principle. And when we start our practical prayer, we claim there is one creative power that creates everything, that individualizes itself as all of its creation. Everything is that divine power and presence taking its own specific form. That everything includes me and each of us. So in that sense, what we kind of think of is, well, I'm a little bit of God. I am this drop of God in the ocean of God. And we understand how we are individualizations of that. And a subset of God, if you will. And Dr. Mellon, James says that's a very Newtonian way of thinking about it. To take the infinity of God and break it up into little pieces and say each of these is a little piece. He says, and the inspiration that I got is, don't do that using Newtonian physics where you break things up into particles. Break it up the way that you would break up a hologram. If you've ever seen a hologram, it's a holographic film, has an image of a rose, for example. And if you cut the film in half, each half has the image of the rose. And if you cut one of those in half, it has the whole image of the rose. And every time you cut it down, it still has the entire image there. And that's the point that James is making, is we are holograms. We are not subsets of being a particle and a little tiny bit of God. We have all of God available to us now. Everything that is God is accessible to us. Each of us individually, all of us together, every moment, all the time. And that's a whole different way of thinking about our spirituality from a quantum level. So what's it going to take for you to, with a straight face and without feeling any qualms, say, I am God? To understand that superset of everything that's available everywhere is available to you now. Jesus seems to be rocking it. Jesus seems to have it right there. And use the awareness of everything that's possible to claim that goodness, to allow the cracks, to let the light come in, to be part of the transformation and be different today than you were yesterday, to be ready for that transformation to happen, to bring something new and different into your life for tomorrow. We're starting the spiritual adventure workshops, and it starts this Thursday at Exhale in Narberth, and also online. Registration is open. And we're starting with life visioning, which is a wonderful way to partner with the infinite to create something new in our lives. Because we don't have to sit here and figure out what's next for us. And we don't just have to surrender everything and allow ourselves to be whipsawed around by the infinite and, some sort of a cosmic roller coaster. We get to partner with the infinite and dive into the questions. What is God's highest idea of my life now? What is next for me? What's the gold that's hidden inside? What's beneath the cracks? What does it look like when I let the me that has been up until now break apart a little bit and allow something different to come into life? So I very much encourage you to take part in that workshop, and all the spiritual adventure workshops are going to be wonderful. That's the one that we're going to be starting with this week. And it's a wonderful way to allow that transformation, that transition, that growth to happen. I was the co-chair of the retreat this year, and my fellow co-chair was Martha Creek. She's going to be speaking at New Thought Philadelphia next week. She is absolutely awesome. Clear and uplifting. She says that she serves those who serve. So she basically has made her life and career about supporting other ministries, and she's supported us in wonderful ways. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from her. We're doing it again for next year. She and I are going to be co-chairs of the 2023 retreat at Unity Village, which is Emergence, Spirit in Bloom. And it's open to everybody. It's not just ministers who get to go to this. It is ministers, it is lay people, it is practitioners, it is folks who have always had on their bucket list that they want to go to Unity Village. And you're invited. It's October 2nd through the 6th next year. Registration open at antn.org, antn.org. And just put it on the back of your mind of something that you could possibly do, as maybe there's a bit of transformation available for you. Maybe you can imagine yourself sitting in the Unity Prayer Vigil and holding consciousness and doing prayers in that long lineage of people who've been doing it for 125, 130 years. Because what's happening next year isn't the same thing that's been happening this year or last year. What's happening now is something new. Maybe there's gold underneath your clay Buddha. Maybe there is some light that's looking to shine through as you. Maybe there's something different that's coming about. Invite it, support it, nurture it, foster it, encourage it along, feed it. Allow that divine power and presence that's the truth of who and what you are to shine even more brightly. Because you are a gift. You deserve to experience that gift and that uplift right now and at every moment. Let your day be a blessing. So it is.